Welcome today to HIPcast. We are excited to have you here. And at the time of this recording, it is not too far past the ONC's announcement of the initial 5 QHINs. And we are so fortunate to have two of the leaders of one of the QHINs here with us today. So I'm going to I'm going to read a couple of bios for you. So Dr. John Blair is the CEO of MedAllies. He has been since its inception in 2001. Dr. Blair is a healthcare and technology executive with board experience across the healthcare industry, including clinical practice, hospital planning and governance, revenue cycle management, managed care, public health, and healthcare informatics. Prior to establishing MedAllies as a top healthcare interoperability networks provider company, Dr. Blair worked as a general surgeon for 20 years before becoming the president of TIPA, a network of over 5,000 physician members. Through Dr. Blair's leadership, TIPA was at the national forefront of transforming healthcare delivery by implementing and ensuring the adoption of meaningful use of health IT and pay-for-performance incentives throughout the TIPA practices. A recognized industry expert, Dr. Blair has served on various national government and industry boards, committees, and work groups. Dr. Blair received his medical degree from Rush Medical School in Chicago. He completed his surgical training at the University of Texas Medical Center in Dallas and performed gastrointestinal fellowship at the Middlesex Hospital in London, England. And for our health information professional speaker today is Dianne Koval. Dianne has been with MedAllies since its inception as well in 2001, and she's the company's Chief Operating, Privacy, and Compliance Officer. Plenty of hats there, Dianne. She's responsible for all customer-facing operations, including professional services, legal, customer support, customer success, government programs, account management, and compliance for all lines of business. She also oversees several corporate programs, including employee engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. With Dianne's collaborative leadership, MedAllies has grown from a regional to a nationally recognized healthcare technology organization. Previously, Dianne was a director of health information management for several healthcare organizations and worked in a professional consulting engagement. Dianne is involved in multiple national organizations and serves as a career mentor for the University of Pittsburgh Health Information Management Program. Dianne received her MS in Health Services Administration from St. Joseph's College and a BS in Health Information Management from Ithaca College. She has published articles in the Journal of American Health Information Management Association, and Dianne was profiled in the University of Pittsburgh Facets magazine for her work as a clinical preceptor for health information management students. She is also a regular contributor to compliance education through professional organizations such as HCCA and SCCE. She has presented various compliance topics both in person and for virtual conferences, as well as leading virtual lunch and learns. Welcome both to the show. We really do appreciate your time. We know as a recent QHIN winner or recipient, I don't know if we'll call you a winner yet. I'm sure there's so much work to do now, but welcome and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, and good to be here with you, Shannan and Seth. And it'd be, we'll take winner, but the term is designated QHIN, so we're now designated. So we're an official QHIN.
I like the winner term better, though.
Yeah. I think we view you all as winners because it's a step in the direction of interoperability, something health information management professionals have been really trying to work toward and support for at least since 2011 and meaningful use, right? But even prior to that. So for us, we believe you're winners.
Yeah. We'll take
Absolutely.
it. Thank you.
And I will mention two things from your bio that stood out to me. One, Dr. Blair, spending time in London, England. I spoke at a digital health IT conference, and I told them, as an East Tennessean, I perfected the English language. So this is what the perfection sounds like from the English language perspective. And Dianne, the Pittsburgh reference got me with the school there. And I remember my wife's from West Virginia, telling me about when you come from the West Virginia side into Pittsburgh, you go through this tunnel, and then it's like magic because the tunnel opens up and you're magically downtown. I'm like, what are you talking about? I made fun of her for 10 years for that. And then I flew up there one time and I flew into the airport, come through that tunnel, and then it was magic. You came into downtown Pittsburgh and it was beautiful. I told the Uber driver, I was like, hold on, I got to call my wife and apologize for making fun of her the last 10 years about Pittsburgh. So, Shannan, you want to tell us a little bit about what a QHIN is and what we're going to talk about today? Because I'm a little lost. There's a lot of acronyms in this.
There are so many acronyms. So essentially, it is a step in the direction of interoperability. It's a quality, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but a quality health information network. And essentially, it is really just transactional. I spoke with Dr. Blair differently about a different topic, and we were talking about how the QHINs work, and it's different than an HIE in that HIEs or HINs are generally a repository where they house data and push it, and QHINs are just like freeways or pipes where data transacts and goes through based on a query or some automated processes that are set up. So essentially, it's to connect the connected to the connected and the unconnected or the disconnected. So there's a whole lot of connections in there. And so we want to talk about today, the really the initiative, the move, the federal government support. Why are you designated as a QHIN? Why do we call you a winner? And what are some goals around that? And then talk about some health information management application in being part of a QHIN, and then how we can kind of ramp up as health information professionals to support interoperability through QHINs.
And I like that goals question. So I'm going to throw the first question out there of what are the immediate collective goals of the QHIN?
Before I jump into that, can I expand a little bit on Shannon's?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually Qualified Health Information Network.
Thank
is
you.
What it stands for. But let's just roll back a little bit historically. So in 2016, you have the 21st Century Cures Act, which was bipartisan legislation to really try to put a government imprint on moving interoperability forward. There have been a lot of complaints about blocking of information and refractory participants in interoperability, even though some of the technology was there. So through a lot of hearings and things, legislation ultimately came about, and it was very broad-based, robust legislation. And two important components that you'll hear about now are, one, the information blocking rule, which is final now and is out, and they've just actually talked about some of the disincentives that are going to hit providers and things. But that was to stop at a technical and provider level, et cetera, the holding of information at the expense of patient care and many other things. So that was one big component. A second large component was TEFCA, the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. And so when you hear that, it was those two things. One, a network of networks, which the QHINs are. If you think about cell phone networks, you've got multiple networks, but they are a network of networks that covers everything. So the QHINs are that network of networks. And then what's built into that is a trust fabric along with standards, and also the common agreement that goes with it gives a level playing field legally, so that you have a hierarchy that goes down from the company Sequoia that manages all this, and it moves from them to the QHINs, to the participants on the QHINs, and to the sub-participants on under those participants. So you've got one legal construct that everybody has. It's standard, it's immutable, and it takes away a ton of confusion and a ton of legal hurdles. So that's what was done with that, to try to be a catalyst to move things forward from what the market had already done. So the market had done a lot on interoperability, but what this does now is pushes it beyond that. It pushes increased connectivity. You've got about half the country on the ambulatory side that are connected, 70% of the hospitals. So if it works as expected, will increase that connectivity. It will expand the stakeholder groups and to other parts of the healthcare industry, and also it will increase the use cases. It's called purposes of use under TEFCA, and right now you've got treatment that's been primarily what is interoperability is pushed on. But now what this is going to do is add in the ability for patients or consumers to have access to their records. MedAllies has an early contract with a company that's a consumer-facing company that will be plugged into the network. It also starts to formally bring in public health at a national scale that's standardized. Also benefits, government benefit services, and also payers under payment and operations. So I just wanted to expand a little bit on what all this does before I get the first question. Any follow up just to that piece?
I have just a comment about it. AHIMA, our professional organization, our mothership, as we would call it, they have been heavily involved in the Sequoia project since day one. We've had several of our professionals that have been on the board at Sequoia and have remained on. Some are still on and have really contributed to this. AHIMA supports the Sequoia project and TEFCA and information blocking. So we've commented as professionals collectively. So we definitely support this. So I don't have any further comments. And Seth, if you don't have any further comments, we'll just go back to the question of just what are some of the immediate collective goals for the QHINs, Dr. Blair?
I hate to do this to you again, but you brought up AHIMA, so I've got to make a comment about that.
No problem. It's great.
So I completely echo what you said about AHIMA, but I want to even bring up something that's even, I think, more exciting that AHIMA is doing. They are co-sponsoring, piggybacking on this whole thing with the QHINs, and I speak about this, that not only are you expanding connectivity, but it's also now allowing to bring into sharp focus the quality of the data. The
Absolutely.
pipe's been laid and everything, but
Yes.
It that doesn't mean that you've got really great interoperability if the data is not good.
That's
And
right.
so now this is bringing data usability into focus, and Sequoia has started or has been working on for about a year a data usability project, which is now being markedly expanded in terms of its maturation and also the goals. But AHIMA now has jumped in and is co-sponsoring that.
Mm-hmm.
So that work is going on. And we've jumped in on it. We're going to take a leadership position in this because we believe it's necessary to have really effective interoperability. But AHIMA is leading that charge with Sequoia on data usability.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. A wonderful collaboration between IT and data content together. That's how you get to where we're trying to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the immediate piece? Now, are you talking about immediate in terms of the way the industry is looking at TEFCA or MedAllies in particular, what our immediate is?
I'd say a little bit of both.
Okay. Well, I think, it's interesting if you look at the industry because, you've got the spectrum from skepticism, which I think is made up a lot of, organizations and companies that are afraid they will be disintermediated from this, or that have been in this so long and seen how some of the big lofty things kind of die on the vine. So you've got the skeptical clear to the opposite end, which is kind of the hype cycle, the Gartner hype
Mm-hmm.
cycle that are just think it's going to just fix everything in a
Yep.
year. And finally we're here and it's done.
Yeah.
We'll have fire at scale nationally and everything will be moved to fire and we'll be fine. So you've got that whole spectrum. And, I like, I'm more with the people in the middle. I think it will happen. I don't think it's going to die on the vine. But I also don't think it's going to fix everything in the next 12 to 24 months. I think, as I said before, it is going to increase connectivity. It's going to take, you've gotten now almost to a have and have not kind of thing in interoperability. And the have nots have just been stuck. Rural hospitals, small physician practices, post acute care, you can go on and on. So the have nots have been stuck. We just kind of bogged down over the last few years. And I think that this lowers the bar of entry at many levels. So those have nots will start to get in. For example, and we just announced it, we did a contract with Veradigm, and they have two EHR products. And if you look at that company, has maybe maybe 4,000 to 5,000 small provider organizations, upwards of 40 to 50,000 providers that are not on a national network, haven't been.
Wow.
And, then you look at all the Epic hospitals and every one of them are on a national network.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so right out of the gate, and Epic's been great about this, and Veradigm is all in. We are bringing up Veradigm in the next 12 to 24 months. All of those providers
That's
I just
awesome.
mentioned will be connected.
Kudos.
So, it's one thing to have a network and to have some of the systems connected, but they've made a commitment. I mean, they just went completely all in. So they will have all of their providers will be able to be on the network. But I think it's even more exciting that Epic is aware of this, and we are working with Epic to not only bring up these providers, but we're finding out where the early adopters are and stuff. And it's going to go all the way until everybody's up. But where they admit to Epic hospitals or consult with providers at Epic hospitals, we are pairing those up out of the gate. So right out of the gate, the haves and have-nots are in. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that is hoped for, and that gets right at that group that's not, that I say are not connected. So that's real world reality that's happening. The other thing is we talked about data quality. There is a ton of interest in that and a lot of participation. And we, in fact, in our platform are building what's called a data user, or we're calling it a data usability module, which is going to be taking back these raw documents. As you said, Shannan, another thing I'll correct is, not correct, but expand on. Some of these networks are true conduits, just just moving the data, but some actually are going to act as repositories. So, there are both the two variations on the theme there. But for those that are just acting as conduits, bringing back a bunch of raw documents is not very usable. So we are going to, on the fly, deduplicate, correct the mistakes or problems with those documents, and create a summary view on the fly. So that summary view, though, is being built to the implementation guide from the data usability group. So out of the gate, the documents or the queries that bring back information are going to be at quality. So that that gives you another thing that I had mentioned that I think will be coming immediately. And lastly, as I said, I gave the example of Epic and Veradigm. There's going to be a focus on the software at each side working in concert with each other, which I think is a big deal. It's pretty tough to
That's real
have
tough.
competitors. When you work on a system that crosses the different departments and different care settings, well, you've got the same group of product owners and developers and stuff coordinating that. When you get outside of that to disparate systems, to have that kind of mentality, I think is very important. Because at the end of the day, you really want these systems that are different systems when it comes to interoperability to work as one.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kind of things that I think I wouldn't say they're all going to happen immediately, but those become the immediate big ticket items that you start to focus on. So I'll talk about that. So that's my comment generally before I talk about MedAllies. But any questions or anything?
No, I don't have any
that?
questions. I don't think, but I do have a couple for the audience. I have a couple points of clarification. First of all, kudos on Veradigm and bringing that forward. I'm a rural Tennessee person. Rural health is part of my heart. So I appreciate the small independent providers who are getting connected because they do really struggle for resources, both IT and human resources to do these things. So thank you thank you to you and Veradigm for that partnership. That's amazing. A couple of things I wanted to point out, or one thing really. You mentioned Epic. So for the audience who doesn't know, Epic Nexus is one of the other designated QHINs. So they have, Epic has a massive part of this effort as well. And I'm not sure, John, if they are, Dr. Blair, if they are a repository or not, but Health Gorilla, we talked about Health Gorilla is a repository and also exchange. So some of these, some of the QHINs are, as Dr. Blair said, just a conduit, and some are the repositories. So maybe that's something you consider as an organization that is going to connect. Do you want to connect to someone that is going to hold your data? Or do you want to connect to someone that is just going to transfer your data? That's maybe that's not a question for right now for an organization, but if you're really, as this grows, it probably would be a really serious consideration for an HIM professional to think about where your data is going to be, if it's just going to be transacted through your QHIN, or if it's going to be stored by one of the QHINs and then transacted that way. There's probably, I see pros and cons both ways. So Dr. Blair, you can talk about some MedAllies. Just take maybe 90 seconds to talk about some MedAllies efforts.
Yeah. That was a good summary on the clinical data repository versus not. And it's going to make sense for both, depending on the company and what the company needs. So both will make sense. So MedAllies, our immediate goal is to get partners, sign up partners, and we really, one, obviously this is a big investment and it's got to be underwritten. So obviously we need to sell this to stay in business. And so it's important from that standpoint, but also it's fun and interesting to bring in new stakeholders, new groups. Dianne and I have been working with providers and provider organizations for 20 years. And we came at from a clinical side. We care about how this works for the clinicians and particularly the patients. And she's done so much work in that. And I don't know if we'll get into it, but that's always been important to us. But also, we get excited about new entries. And I'll give you one example. We just signed a contract with a company called Lucent Technologies, Beyond Lucent Technology, and they serve first responders. So EMS, firefighters, the ones that are in the field, they're scooping people up after a car wreck or whatever. And, think about they just live in the desert in a drought and don't have
Yeah.
anything. And think about the number of problems that occur from no information in terms
Yeah.
of not knowing allergies or medications or problems, and what would happen if you really knew about the patient when you got them. So, they're pretty enthusiastic. They're going to plug in, and right out of the gate, all across the country, their first responders will have this information. So, for me, the immediate piece is what we can do to bring in more into the fold. I also mentioned the consumer side, and we're going to be opening this up for patients to be able to have access to their information. So those are a couple of things, and I could go on and on, but I don't want to take the whole time.
No, it's a lot of good information. It's fascinating how complex this is, but it's also amazing. I mean, this is incredibly needed in the marketplace, but that's also where an HI professional is needed in the marketplace as well. And Dianne, you're serving in that role, and I'm curious, what are daily operations like at a QHIN, and how has being an HI professional helped you in your daily activities?
Yeah, we actually started, when we knew we were going to go and become a QHIN, over a year ago. The process of getting ready for that responsibility involved making sure our policies or our existing policies were in line with what the requirements were on the SOPs, the standard operating procedures were under TEFCA. So it took months to get the governance in place the way it needed to align, to get our existing policies in place, like our onboarding, because now we have the purpose of use and how are you vetting the customers and making sure that when they come to us, that when they say they're coming to you for treatment, that they actually are, in fact, going to query for treatment. And, as an HIM professional, you need to vet that and you need to make sure they're legit because you're putting them on your network. So we also needed to create new policies because there wasn't a governance structure in place that met the qualifications of what needed to be in place for TEFCA. So we got to expand to include our what we have as a governing council at MedAllies to oversee our network. So that was really exciting, and understanding the types of professionals that we wanted to put on that committee. And then from an operations perspective, now it's time to put it across the board and put it into production. And with operating an organization, it's everything from the sales to onboarding. It's everything from the legal and passing down flow down agreements. So making sure that's moving slowly, and then making sure the staff understands their roles and responsibilities in those policies and procedures, and making sure they're trained to do that, because we're altering new roles, new governing structure, and making sure that they understand that. Now that's separate from the technical components, which are actually under the CTO, to make sure the engine runs, which is the area of responsibility, because that's a big piece. We want a network that's up and humming all the time. And we're coordinating that with, and also supporting it in the operations side, because we have a whole professional services and support infrastructure to do that, which is important. We may be a network and we may have interoperability, but you want to be able to talk to a human who understands healthcare when you call up for support. And that's been a really big focus of ours, because I come from the hospital side of things and not a technology person. I want to talk to somebody that understands my being a hospital or being a provider or being a vendor, the needs I need. And I'm not just a number when you call MedAllies, like, oh, who are you? What do you want? We know our customers.
Yeah, interoperability is one of those terms that's really fun too, because it's. I think about how long have we talked about that in the HI profession? I think it was on the entrance exam for HIM school back when I went into school. Was, can you even spell interoperability, let alone define it?
Seth, you're such a young pup. That wasn't that long ago, buddy. Okay.
Yeah.
You're just a young guy. So that doesn't really count. But, Dianne, you're talking about a lot of the components of HIM and governance. Those are things that, that's our lifeblood, right? That's in our DNA. Yep. But Dr. Blair had mentioned earlier the data usability and how a HEMA is coming in, because we always talk about garbage in is garbage out, right? And so data usability and the integrity of the data, having the data be accurate and have it be available and usable, right? That's part of our data governance definition. So thinking about, I have a couple of questions for you. One of them, the first one is really, how does a health information professional first of all, how do they just get more knowledgeable about this space and about QHINs to prepare themselves either to move into a role within that space or to help them prepare their organization to bring themselves into a relationship with the QHIN?
Yeah, well, fortunately, being an HIM professional, we come with a bunch of advantages, right? So we understand the healthcare industry, we understand HIPAA, we understand all of the healthcare sectors. So that's already a plus. In addition, there is a tremendous amount of resources by the government to educate people on these types of initiatives like Health IT Gov. They have webinars, they have fact sheets, they have all sorts of information to learn about this, and it's free. Also, ONC opens up their annual meetings, and those recordings can be watched, so you don't even have to pay for that, and you can get that knowledge. And actually, for our organizations, one of our, two of our core values are aware and accountable. And we expect our employees to be engaged in the industry also. So our responsibility is not just to set the goal of where we want to go in the future, but to make sure that the employees are aware and accountable for bringing us to that goal. So we spend time we have a knowledge library for employees where that information is made available. So HIM professionals can kind of do the same of making that available to employees and teaching others about that, because that increases your knowledge. There's nothing that demonstrates a topic more than teaching it. and making that available to the employees, they become educated on that. We've also done internal trainings to train employees, and then understand the offerings of QHINs and the common agreement, and that's also publicly available information, and understanding what's included in that and what the different QHINs offer, and then understanding what your vendor offers. We've seen this time and time again, because I'm going to date myself because Seth started.
Yeah.
I've been involved in initiatives from when we had, we're running HIEs to implementation of electronic health records, and always on the interoperability side. And a lot, you see people get vendors and products, they don't fully implement the functionality of things. So making sure that you're working with your EHR vendor or your vendor to find out what the options are, and making sure that you're maximizing that. For example, we run a direct network. We took on another customer and realized that vendor had implemented a unidirectional interface for those customers. So half of the functionality was missing. And we're like, from an HIM professional, you're like, you want the full functionality. If you're going to get something, you want the full functionality. You want it working the way it's supposed to work, not an accept, we're going to accept half of this, and that's good enough, because for some people, let's just get it hooked up and we'll call it a day. That's not the norm in our profession. We don't do half of a job. We understand completeness, accuracy, quality of what we're doing.
And that ultimately becomes shelfware if it's not being utilized to the fullest extent.
Yeah,
agreed.
absolutely. One final question for you, Dianne, and then Seth,
Sure.
you'll have to be my guide on time because I can't see the timer. Because I have one follow-up question for
I'd
Dr.
say this
Blair.
will be the final questions.
Okay, this will be the final one. Maybe we have time for one more. Dianne, so I was thinking about jobs, future jobs, or even current jobs for health information professionals.
Yeah.
With health information exchanges and networks that exist today, which are few, unfortunately, because of lack of sustainability after grant funding, which would be your question, Dr. Blair, if we get there. For you, Dianne, the question is, in health information exchanges, I see health information professionals being kind of a specialist for like the EMPI. What other kind of roles would be available for a health information professional in a QHIN?
There actually are a lot of roles. So going back to my role as a mentor for the University of Pittsburgh students, who are both the master's degree students and the bachelor's students. And they're coming out and they want to get into this field, and actually have a student coming in that's actually a nurse going back to school for this. There's account management roles, working project management roles, managing the EMPI, managing the record locator service, onboarding organizations onto the network. Supporting these organizations, doing operations like I talked about, creating the policies and procedures, or running governance. All of those roles would serve well for HIM professionals to take on. And I think sometimes people limit themselves, like it has to be titled as health information. But when I have students start, I have them work in all different areas to kind of match them to their interest, that they may not even think that that's a role for them. So they'll start as HIM. And I had one student that actually, it was an HIM professional that went on to work for Amazon in their pharmacy department, in their pharmacy area.
Wow.
Which is not traditional, but we want to get out there in these non-traditional roles and be able to contribute to the healthcare sector.
Yeah, healthcare is non-traditional now. This is not your mama's healthcare, right? Not your mama's lemonade, right? That's right. Yes. It's not what it used to be.
Yes, I remember when my parents are like, "Oh, you're going to go into that, and the only job you're going to be able to get is work in a hospital medical records department." And I think to myself now, wow, what a decision! Wow. Like that's I did it for a little while, but I've had such a non-traditional job for the past 25 years.
Yeah, now it's hard to find a job that's in a traditional role.
Yeah.
Most of us are in non-traditional roles.
Yeah,
it really is. Pandemic. It really is. And I do think we've come to the end of the time. So Dr. Blair, you're off the hook on giving away your secret sauce to sustainability for MedAllies. So that's great. We appreciate your time. The health information professionals who will listen to this appreciate it. It's encouraging, Dianne, to have you on to talk about the opportunities that health information professionals have. Dr. Blair, it has been a pleasure to learn from you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for doing the good work. Thank you for bringing the small physician practices. Thank you for thinking of them. Thank you for getting that partnership. That is massive for the American population. So we appreciate you. Seth?
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you both. And Shannon, until next time, my friend.
All right, buddy.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.